What small lies like brown cows produce chocolate milk or hedgehogs grow on chestnut trees can you tell young children? I read here that one user told their kids they beep when they sleep so they could tell when they were fake sleeping. So I told mine the same little lie and I learned that these little shoots fake sleeping all the time. There's one that always comes up with these types of posts about telling kids that their ears turn a different color when they're lying, so they cover their ears when they're trying to fib to their parents. They're hilarious. My uncle used to live on Twin Peaks in San Francisco. He used to pick up the phone and call the fog department late in the afternoon and order some evening fog. He worked for the city and we believed him. Took me a few years to figure out the fog comes in almost every afternoon. They don't make that type of battery anymore. Before my kids could read well, I was able to nip the whiny and constant I want X at the grocery store easily. When they wanted something, I would check the shopping list and sadly say sorry, we can't get it. It's not on the list. They quickly believed the list was the final word they couldn't argue against. Of course, if they had been behaving and it was a reasonable request, it was also easy to say yep, there it is. Hold on, need to have a word with the wife. My grandma used to tell me that people went to the actual moon on their honeymoon. I was so excited to get married. Your grandmother could significantly increase the rate of marriage among gullible male engineering students. My older brother always said, if you want warm ice, just freeze warm water. Warm ice, perfect for. The controller is on, you're the other guy. My younger brother is 12 and is still convinced to this day that he beat me 7-0 in his first game of FIFA when he was 6. Baby toes. Ask a 4-5-year-old if they've lost their baby toes yet, or if any of their adult toes have grown in. Moths are ghosts of butterflies, or, no matter how fast you run at them, automatic doors will always open. It's a work phone. They won't let me have any games on it. My dad tried to pull this after letting us play Snake on his Nokia 3300. We did not buy it. The fluffy ends of cattails turn into kittens. My daughter thought that was where kittens came from for years. My pop-up told me that one. Then I saw him cut a bunch down when he cut the grass and was so upset with him for hurting all the kitties. As with all other girls, when you reach your 10th birthday you must decide if you want to stay as a girl or become a horse. I'm kinda glad no one told me this because I would have picked horse before they even finished talking and then been massively disappointed. Still don't entirely understand the whole horse phase thing, but by god did I get it. I told my daughter that the world used to be in black and white until the 60s. As someone born in the early 2000s, whenever I'm asked to picture something from the 90s I always imagine the faded colors and sound quality from that time, no matter what. My sister tells my nephew that the needs to charge to get him to stop playing with something. For example, he likes when they turn on the overhead light in the car at night, so when they turn it off and he begs them to turn it back on they tell him they can't because it needs to charge. He nods and says oh okay. My two young, recently adopted nephews came over one day. I had to look after them for half an hour or so. I don't do kids. They had some soapy water to blow bubbles with but ended up rubbing it into my head for a laugh. I counted the minutes until their mother returned, but at least they were amused. Their mom came back and took them off my hands. I went to shower the soap off my head and took the opportunity to shave it at the same time. When my nephews returned later that day I explained that the soapy water had made my hair fall out. They looked horrified. I had the TV on mute watching a football game and was 99% of the way to convincing my cousin's 5-year-old that he was deaf to the sound of TVs until my dumbass brother walked in and asked why I had the TV muted. As a bit of harmless fun my wife and I told our then 6-year-old son that I had never learned to wink. Now and again I would call my son over to demonstrate my winking progress, or rather lack thereof. He would dutifully try to instruct me on proper technique, often going as far as holding one of my eyelids open. Eventually he gave up and wrote me off as a lost cause. Fast forward a bit to my son becoming a teenager. In one of his more cocky moments he bragged that I'd never been able to fool him. Oh really, I said, and continued nonchalantly, well I guess you got my number. I looked directly in the eye and shot him a good, solid wink. It took a couple of seconds for his brain to process, but the truth hit him full in the face and his head dropped in unanticipated defeat, muttering, "I hate you guys." My wife and I laughed real hard that day, and even now, my son turns away if I wink at him. Perfect. All citrus fruit is the same fruit, just in different stages of ripeness. My mother was the queen of small lies. Did you know the beach has a shell tax? You're allowed 3 shells, but any more than that, you have to pay per shell when you leave the beach. Cats secretly love water. That's why we have to keep the toilet lid down, otherwise your kitten is going to fall in. Ice cream doesn't come in chocolate, only vanilla. Ironically enough, vanilla is easier to get out of clothes. The ever-present driving a car with the inside lights on is illegal. If you make a face, it's going to freeze that way. This one backfired when walking through an airport. We saw a man who clearly had a stroke and I loudly asked him if his face got stuck that way. If you're awake when daylight savings happens, you'll get stuck 1 hour in the past. I told my 3-year-old son that Dr. Pepper is only for doctors. I'm a vet and I drink it all the time. Now he goes around the playground scolding other kids for drinking soda because they are not doctors. My dad told us that Pringles were only for people with mustaches. He had a mustache. My boss told his kid cows dig holes in the ground and hibernate in the winter. That's why we never see them in the snow. She's gonna have a rude awakening. My aunts used to tell us that if we ate mashed potatoes we'd get big boobs. They'd use one aunt as proof. I'm 46. Love mashed potatoes. Still waiting. Actually, the older I get, the more grateful I am that I don't have a big chest. When I was 16-17 I was a waitress in a small coffee shop diner. One day I was sitting at the counter having a quick cigarette. One of my regulars decides to tease me that smoking will stunt my growth. So I stood up and just waved at myself and said, "Too late, I'm 6 feet tall." Was close to that then. Was at the music store with some younger family members. Saw some wooden maracas. Convinced them maracas grow on marica bushes and the rattle inside came from seeds that were trapped because the maracas were harvested just before they opened up. Username checks out like heck. Whenever I see a screaming child in public, I am so tempted to go up to them and tell them, you know, screaming is how the monsters find you. OMG, this is so mean, but so hilarious. I am going to use it for a bad day. Thank you for this. The ice cream truck only plays the music when he is sold out. My sister and brother-in-law told their kids it was the music truck. It just drove around the neighborhood playing music for everyone to enjoy. My brother-in-law put lottery scratch tickets in all of the adults' stockings at Christmas. Someone let my 6-year-old nephew scratch a ticket. It was a loser. I told him that if he had scratched in the other direction, it would have been a winner, but he scratched the wrong way. He stared at me wide-eyed for a few seconds, then burst into tears. I hadn't spent a lot of time around young kids and didn't realize they don't always get sarcasm. Oops. Also, the nephew is now 20 and has a gambling problem. Still chasing that win. My fault? It looks like you should have scratched the other way. Well, my dad told me that they tilted the Tower of Pisa because the souvenirs the townspeople made were crooked. That humans are a kind of bean, like baked beans, kidney beans, pinto beans, human beans. I remember exclaiming this loudly when in the playground when I was 5. Roald Dahl used that in his book The BFG:D. My mum gets aches in her shoulders and neck pretty often, so my dad will rub her back while they're going out their day together. A lot of my memories of them are of her sitting on the floor in front of the couch grading papers that her students had turned in, and him sitting on the sofa behind her watching TV and massaging her neck or her shoulders with one of those wooden back massagers. They used "I'm massaging your mum's back" as a white lie one time when they forgot to lock the bedroom door and I walked in on them making love. Clouds are produced by smokestacks. When I was in middle school, kids would always find cut words in foreign languages and convince others that it meant something nice. Later as an adult I went to Guam for a few weeks, and while me and a friend were waiting to cross the street an Asian family showed up. Grandmother, mother and young, around 7ish, son. My friend has a few kids of his own and said something that the young boy, being friendly than the kid, looked at his and said, "I am retard." He repeated it a few times and I just knew someone, relative or friend, Told him that must have meant hello in English or something. That the teachers live inside the school. I grew up in rural Australia and this was true for me. It was always a strange feeling seeing the principal's wife walking in her pajamas to collect the mail as class was starting. If you're like my older brothers, you can tell them that the skin between your thumb and forefinger is called a scrotum. I believed them for years until I learned that scrotums aren't real. Just wait till you Google what a weenus is. I convinced my brother that badgers were mythical creatures, like dragons or mermaids. Our mum got a call from the school one day because he was freaking out because he had seen a dead one on his walk to school. My older brother convinced me that camels were mythical creatures. Imagine my shock when we went to the zoo and saw camels. Then cue my confusion as to why they didn't have unicorns too. Buffaloes with wings exist. Yes, the majestic buffalo birds of Patagonia. Delicious. One day we saw some geese at the local lake and I explained to my child that baby geese are called goslings, the most famous of which is named Ryan. My daughter insists that because baby geese are goslings, baby swans are swaslings. We adopted the word. Years later, her little brother thinks that's the correct word. If bees make honey, wasps make mustard. What makes honey mustard then? A friend of mine grew up in the projects in Harlem. The small lie she was told as a small child was that the color of a person's poop was determined by their skin color. She was shocked and loudly told her mom that white lady pooped brown too when a lady forgot to flush one time at Macy's during the pre-Christmas shopping rush. Oh man, imagine if it was green instead. Aliens. Black guy here. My aunt always told us that the black grease spots on the road were little black kids that didn't look both ways and got ran over. That's so fricked up and so fricking funny. Once, when my daughter was little, we were walking on a trail, and she kept running ahead, so I told her that there were deer out in the area and if one caught her, it would steal her face. Lo and behold, around the next bend, there was a deer standing there and she absolutely lost her crap. Scared of monsters? Billy Mays here with the patented monster spray. It's just tap water, or say that the monster are friendly and monster spray only works on bad ones. My mom did that for me. I kept complaining that the monster spray wasn't working, so she brought the local pastor over. Pastor recognized the signs of early schizophrenia. Now I'm on medication and the anti-monster pills work. I have, since my daughter's birth, never called an ostrich anything but a chocobo in her presence. My goal is to keep it going at least until she starts school. Pine cones are tree poop. I keep a whole list of these to tell my daughter once she's old enough to understand, but young enough to be taken in. So far my favorite that I've come up with is, if you hit a dead end while driving, that's it. No more driving for you, ever. If you practice enough, you can catch your own shadow. When Redbox DVD rentals were still a thing, I told my kids there was a little guy who worked inside the box and that handed the movies out of the slot. Every time we went to the store my kids looked all over the machine but couldn't figure out how the guy got in. The machine was in our grocery store next to customer service, and one time I could see the clerk laughing. I went over and she quietly told me that almost every dad told their kids that and half her day was spent watching little kids examine the machine. She also told me that it was never the moms, only dads. You have been visited by the romantic doggo. Comment, love is magic so you never fall in the friend zone. Plus thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.